Thank you, Professor Ricolfi, and I'm very grateful for the invitation to be here inside the wire. The revolution is rising, you know, and that's why I'm today inside the wire. It's become impossible not to hear the noise of the intellectual property system destroying itself. You can hear the sound of the gears beginning to break and the machinery falling apart. You can hear it inside the largest information technology firms on earth. You can hear it inside the governments beginning to get nervous about the possibility that people will begin to understand. You can hear it even in the international civil service agencies, which try as hard as possible not to hear anything. So, all revolutions begin with a question. Usually the question is why. Sometimes the question is who. The question here is the Bertolt Brecht's question: who built the pyramids of Thebes? Or maybe he stole that question from someone else. If I have seen any further into that question, I saw it by standing on the shoulders of giants. But I stole that from Isaac Newton, who stole that from Louis Vives, who stole that from Bernard of Chartres, which we know because the American sociologist of science, Robert Merton, taught us that, who stole it from an anonymous author of a note in a British journal in 1934, who stole it who knows where. This, of course, is the beginning of the revolution, that is, the application of the word theft to what previously had been known as learning. So we are now learning something in this room and in these agencies and in our various places around the world. We are learning that there is a connection between the fundamental human rights and the reappropriation of what belongs to us that was taken from us by people who turned knowledge into commodities. An inevitable, temporary, regrettable step in the process of getting back to freedom. Lord Macaulay, writing about the English Glorious Revolution of 1688, from his position in the middle of the 19th century, found himself with the question. Here were all the great politicians of Whig England having successfully dislodged a bitterly and evilly disposed despot, aware of enormous numbers of legal reforms that needed to be made, busy reshaping the English Constitution in the winter of 1688-89, and he shows how one after another of the great reforms of the 18th century were proposed, and he said to himself, how strange. Nobody said, let's repeal the censorship of the press, which anybody now knows, Lord Macaulay says, was the single most important reform, because the freedom of public discussion is the guarantor of all other rights. From the perspective of 1850, 1688 seemed rather backward in this recognition. In the middle 1960s, the then dominant American scholar of copyright, Mel Nimmer, wrote an article asking a revolutionary question: why is copyright consistent with the First Amendment guarantee of freedom of speech? And he wrestled with it for a little while and came to some comparatively unsatisfying answers which satisfied him, mostly. And then the field of copyright law went to sleep on those answers for another 20 years. By the time they found themselves hearing the question again, it was asked rather loudly by a few of us, and the answers that seemed barely satisfactory in 1967 seemed entirely useless altogether. Now, mind you, the United States Supreme Court hadn't quite figured that out yet. Thanks to a very skilled and daring investigator, my colleague Larry Lessig, we were able to demonstrate that the Supreme Court didn't understand that problem at all. And we are unfortunately living with the consequences of their continuing, but I assure you temporary, ignorance. The question, what is the fundamental consistency, if any, between the freedom of speech and copyright law in the United States, now has its grand international rhyme here today. What is the consistency between the fundamental guarantee of the right of human beings to self-determination and liberty with the system of the ownership of ideas? That's a revolutionary question, and it has a simple answer, as revolutionary questions do. There is no consistency between the guarantee of fundamental human rights and a system of ownership of ideas. So those of us who know the answer to the question are beginning to implement the necessary step. We are making it impossible to continue with the system of the ownership of ideas. We will be finished with that work within our lifetimes, and the system of ownership of ideas will have been relegated to that very important but almost forgotten location, the dust heap of history. How do we go about this work? Well, we make things, and we give them away. Here, we made this. Would you like it? Take some. It's free. Free as in freedom, we say, because we wish to point out that the act of creating is the act of creating freedom. The act of uncreating freedom through ownership is the act of uncreation. It was said a few minutes ago, fully reflective of the appropriate received wisdom that is now dying the death that it deserves, that the law of intellectual property was about the rights of producers. It was not. The law of intellectual property was the law of the rights of distributors, who oppressed producers by the alienation of the production from those who made and used it. We reverse that process and eliminate the law of intellectual property by eliminating distributors. We eliminate distributors because the technology of human society at the beginning of the 21st century makes distribution child's play. And therefore, we ask children to be the distributors, and they succeed very well. And not, of course, just children, also teachers, students, scientists, musicians, poets, right? We succeed very well in distributing our own. The distributors are upset. What? We have been running the world for 125 years on the basis of Thomas Edison's inventions for making the distributor more important than the producer. Quiet, please. We are running the world. Leave us alone. No, we say. We made this. Would you like some? Take it. It's free. No, they say. There must be something wrong here. Surely you are infringing our patent on what? The novel and unobvious process of alienating the creator's work in order to create in